This is A Line Around Your Thoughts, a podcast that centers on conversations with artists, writers, musicians, and creatives from around the inland Northwest. I'm EJ Iannelli, and I'm joined in the Rogue Heart Media studio by Pollyanne Birge of the Office of Neighborhood Services and artist Madison Merica. So welcome, Pollyanne, and welcome, Madison.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
You're here in these seats to talk about This Is Spokane, the Civic zine, and just out of curiosity, if you could give some folks some background on what exactly that is.
Sure. I work for the Office of Neighborhood Services, as you mentioned, and in that work, we get asked a lot of questions around how the city works, all the acronyms, what does city council do, what do the departments do, and it's often the city isn't the best storyteller oftentimes, and it's in a lot of legal language, and so it's quite frankly kind of boring. And so we wanted to try to illuminate that with pictures, with illustrations, and with layman's terms or easy terms to kind of find out how those things work. So let's make it easier. And I always say, yes, be a critic of the city for their work, but be the best critic you can be by understanding how it works.
Right. And Madison, how did you come to be involved with this zine initially?
So there was I guess it was like a partnership with Spokane Arts. They put out the word that they needed an illustrator. And there was like a whole panel and a submission process. So I just submitted a piece of art based on a prompt. And then they selected me and we went from there.
And what is some of your background as an artist? Have you been in Spokane a while, and have you been working professionally in the creative sphere for a while now?
Yeah, so my background is more graphic design, specifically in user interface and web design. Funnily enough, just totally different from what I'm doing now. So I was doing that for 10 years after I graduated from school, and I got super burnt out on that, and I've always had a passion for illustration and just wanted to get back to just drawing more. And so I left my job and went through a whole creative rediscovery and started my own kind of freelance business, and I also just have an art business, or I met some of the local markets selling my work that's all Spokane themed, I've been doing that for I guess 2 years now, and so that's kind of been my current and new passion.
Oh, very cool. And it's good that you were able to go freelance, because not everybody either is able to make that leap or kind of has the courage to make that leap. So to shift to a freelance position is, it's brave, but it's good that you're able to make it work.
Yeah. And I'd had a little experience when we moved. We were my husband and I were on the west side, just south of Seattle, for a few years after I graduated from school. And when we moved to Spokane, it was for his job, and I spent probably 6 months just doing freelance work, so I had a little bit of experience with that, and was able to kind of make that work then. So I knew that when I left my job, again, I was all right, I got this, I can totally do it. I've got enough experience, so yeah. But it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, because I think the perennial question in the artistic sphere is, and it's one topic that continually resurfaces in every conversation that we seem to have here, is how do you make things pencil out, and how do you pursue a passion professionally? And so, by dint of being at the markets and having that face-to-face presence, I think that is probably really crucial to making sure that, people want to have that personal connection with the art. It's not just enough to look aesthetically pleasing, but also to kind of know the creative force behind it as well.
Yeah, it's been huge. Doing the markets, I'm really introverted, so I didn't know if I was gonna enjoy that, but every single one that I do, I meet so many interesting people, and I have had so many word of mouth just, hey, I saw you at the market, can you do this for me? Or like, oh, I've been following you on Instagram, it was so cool to see your stuff in person, can you like do this, and this? I've had really cool projects come out of the face-to-face interaction, because I think people knowing that, yeah, you're like a real person, and like I am pretty open to, like, my stuff is very like Spokane themed, so people are really liking that, and they're sort of like, oh, will you do this Spokane theme? I was like, yeah, sign me up, I'm all about it.
And I think it's the ideal forum for the introverted, because it's probably the large networking gatherings that are the most daunting for the introverted, whereas those one-on-one face-to-face interactions are, I would assume, more advantageous, or more kind of in your lane as an introvert.
Yeah, I still don't know how to network. I've gone to several
join the club
events and been like, I will be a wallflower.
And Pollyanne, your background, you have an artistic background as well. So I almost hesitated in the intro saying, kind of limiting you to the Office of Neighborhood Services, because you come to us after a stint in Portland, and you're very immersed in the print world, for one.
Well, thank you so much. I'm a big fan of art, and I kind of consider myself more of an arts administrator. So yes, I'm from Spokane, born and bred. I grew up across the street from Playfair Racecourse, right on Sprague. And then I went to Portland for about 30 years, 27 years. And there I worked for a couple different elected officials. One was a man named Sam Adams, who really was at the top of his game in focusing kind of the municipality around the arts, not only as the good thing to do, but also an economic driver, the right thing to do, social justice. He really had his arms wrapped around what the arts meant, and funded a lot of, spent a lot of city funds supporting those things, like more so than any other mayor in the past. And then when we were there at City Hall, we would use City Hall as a venue to have monthly art shows. And we were always about the unsung heroes, not just the beautiful watercolors of Haystack Rock, which is a really famous rock on the Oregon coast, but we had comic book artists, and we'd have a big party at City Hall, and we had a skateboard ramp that we actually set up in front of City Hall, and had a rock show, and Dead Moon, which is kind of I'm sure your listeners might know who Dead Moon is, but it's a kind of a seminal punk band from the Portland area, and we had a show for them, and it was really nice. And the two couples actually, or the couple who run the band, one of them like passed on right after that, and we did a proclamation Dead Moon night. They have a song, and so we did a proclamation Dead Moon night. And so it was just a really fun way to bring people in. And when we would talk to people in the crowd and say, who's here for the first time, more than half the people would raise their hand, and we'd say, hey, this is a great, kind of the same thing, like it's a great way to bring people in and make it understandable when they're, because usually when people come to City Hall for the first time, it's their spitting, angry fire, and I get that. I totally get that. But also, let's give people opportunities to come inside, ask better questions, celebrate their loved ones, celebrate the community. So I did that. I worked for another elected official named Chloe Daly, who ran a bookstore, the Reading Frenzy, which was kind of she's a tastemaker, and a lot of the printmakers and illustrators from around that area kind of, that was their first show sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so her campaign piece was a comic book by Joe Sacco, who's Joe Sacco, yeah. So they're good friends. And
he covered the war in Bosnia,
exactly, and Palestine and Israel. So he did a lot of kind of that comic journalism type stuff. So she was really tapped in, and we really leaned on that when I was there with Sam Adams, and I came back with Chloe. And during that, I'm getting to a point, I swear, during that when I was at Chloe, we came up with this idea of a municipal civic zine. Mm-hmm. And so that was my first foray into how are we talking about how the government works in a zine form, or it's short for magazine for people don't maybe know what zines are. There are some people don't. And so then we circled back and did another one. Portland had a really incredible report coming from the planning department there called The Racist History of Portland Planning, mm-hmm. that talked about redlining and how a lot of families of color got their houses like eminent domain taken away, whatever. And we circled back because that report, again, most people won't pick up a 120-page report with addendum and graphs and a lot of text, but they will pick up a zine that tells a story. Cleo Davis, his family this happened to, they'll pick up a zine and listen to a story and then learn along the way. I think that's kind of what happens to the zine here too, is I hand them out not only at the neighborhood councils, and we have some at the libraries, we have them all over. I mean, I'm handing them out at the grocery store too. It's a beautiful piece, so people pick it up and go, "This is lovely." And I'm telling you, so many people compliment you on the illustrations, and then they go, "Oh, I'm learning something too." So I think people come at it both ways. So we're trying to use that format to potentially think about how to talk about other things during this. We talked to a lot of departments of the city, and everyone said, "Oh gosh, we could almost do a whole zine on budget or a whole zine on planning." Yes, you can.
Yes, more pictures.
Yeah, more pictures. So I just think it really makes it far more accessible for folks.
Yeah, and so you've been kind of at the nexus of government and arts.
Absolutely.
And using art as an awareness raising tool. And yeah, the zine seems like an ideal format for doing that, and I'm glad you defined what a zine is, because it's something that's well known in the print world, but isn't necessarily known, among sort of lay people or non-artists necessarily. But if you could tease out the distinction, because I was thinking about the distinction between a zine and, say, a pamphlet, because it seems to me like a zine has it's certainly serial, whereas a pamphlet might not necessarily be. And it also has a more kind of DIY ethos, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And that's kind of actually debated when I'd hand people and say zine. People are like, "Zine? What?" I'm like, "No, zine."
Yeah.
And
Stop
people would
calling
say,
it a zine.
I know, right? And people say, "Well, is it a booklet?" And I'm like, "Well, kind of." So, I mean, I don't want to be the arbiter of what a zine is and what, a chat book is and whatever thing else. I think you're absolutely right. For me, I'm 52, so zine absolutely was cut and paste before the computer. Yes, before the computer, guys, before the internet. I was alive and people were doing stuff, cutting and pasting. So it was far more kind of tactile. And this one, of course, is a very sophisticated zine. I think you could almost say it's like a comic book, but you kind of.
Well, and there was a print budget for it, which
Absolutely.
The traditional zine generally is the cheapest you can possibly make it.
Right.
Yeah, I think you had a Vista as a sponsor now.
We did.
Yeah.
They laid down some scratch for us to be able to do that. And we were really tight with our budget and whatnot. But yep. So thanks to Avista, if you're listening.
And so do you have experience, or had you had experience in the zine world before this? Because I know that, and this is probably a development that came out after your involvement in this or during your involvement with this, but you just designed the Inlander Best Of cover. So it's not your first print rodeo necessarily, but did you have experience in the zine world before this?
Oh, not a lot. I'd say like the most of my experience actually came from when I was a very, very small child and was making them before I knew what they were. But like taking pieces of it, like drawing pictures and like writing little stories, and then I would bind with like yarn. Like I'd pull punch the sides and like bind them with yarn, and then like give them to my parents or like give them to my friends at school. And then when I got older, it wasn't until college, because I feel like zine was unheard of when I was a kid. Like they've been making a comeback, it seems like.
Yeah.
So I did a college project where it was like all about like, we're making zines and this is what they are. And the limitations they set for us was regards to like the print, kind of like you can print, you cannot print in color. You have to do black and white. You have to do your paper, and like, so I got really creative with the one that I made in college. But beyond that, my world has been so digital.
So was this a nice change of pace then?
This was a great change of pace. Yeah, this was so much fun. I loved just like that this had like a narrative. It wasn't just like a cover or a kind of a one-off thing. There was a whole series. I mean, I think, what did I do, like 20-some?
24, 25, I think, illustrations.
Yeah, illustrations that all kind of had to be the same, general like look and feel, I guess, like consistent style. So,
and since you mentioned that, I mean, given that we are kind of an audio first format, it's hard to render the visual in words. What is it? The famous quote by Frank Zappa, dancing about architecture. But, writing about art is like dancing about architecture or writing about music. But in this, your style, and maybe this is a reason why you were chosen, but your style has, and I don't mean this in the pejorative sense, but it's very much like almost children's book illustrations. Like that's, I got almost a nostalgia for that. And so I didn't know if maybe that struck you as a good pairing, because you have, it's almost semi-realistic, but there's this slight artificiality to it. And then also, I think of some of your flow charts where you introduce signs and arrows and things like that to bring some energy into what might be a static scene.
Yeah, I take a lot of inspiration from. There's a few different graphic novelists that I follow, but I think almost like the childlike side comes from like, I don't have a professional background in like illustration. Like that has all been, self-taught, and I just have taken inspiration from different things I've seen. And the main prompt with winning the project was, we're looking for not super cartoony, pretty realistic, but like still something that's going to be interesting and engaging for our, not too like, we don't want clip art, right? So, I tried my best to nail down what the written prompt was with the style.
And if you'll have it just to brag for a second, absolutely. I think it was unanimous when there was a group of people, actually someone from the Emerson Garfield Neighborhood Council, Crystal.
Oh, okay.
And there was a student from On Track. There was a few people, Lisa Edwards, the art liaison for the city. There's a few people deciding this, and we were unanimous. And it was that you were very technically talented, but also that there was a softness and there was an accessibility to your work. And also you were able to do the technical pieces really, really well, the mapping and stuff. So I think when you mentioned there's 24 illustrations, some of those illustrations have multiple illustrations within one. So it's like, we got a really good deal for,
Well, like you rendered a city council meeting. And so, this is, it takes on almost like a courtroom drawing.
That was the original prompt.
Yeah.
They were like, draw the city council. And I was like, ooh. So like a lot of people that will read this and look at this, and people that follow me may not know this at all. But I don't really draw people. So this was like a new thing for me.
Well,
like,
clearly you do, because the people in this,
this was like I'm gonna challenge, like, this is a great like example of like the resume being like, I don't know if I'm qualified for the job, and being like, I'm gonna go for it anyway and figure it out. And failure is not an option, because like if I get this, I have to knock it out of the park. And I had to learn very quickly how to draw people quicker than I would normally, because since it's a little bit of a challenge for me. That was.
But Pollyanne speaks about the accessibility, and I think that's, it's a very familiar style. It's not necessarily one that I would say looks like this or looks like that, and yet there is a ring of familiarity to it. And so I think, it was a really good pairing with this zine when you're trying to make complex things more accessible and more digestible for the average person. It complements it well. But there is still quite a bit of text in this. And don't let me forget that I really want to talk about how much research you had to do in order to render your drawings. But I want to talk about the text. And was it a text first and then drawing later? Or was it drawing first and then you wrote the text to suit?
It was very iterative, and I will say working with Madison was probably one of the easiest, coolest experiences that myself and my colleague had on the zine. We worked with a lot of the departments, so they would give us 3 or 4 pages of information. We're like, bro, like we can't use all of this. We have to really kind of make it a little bit more accessible. So then we would get a drawing. We would kind of shave it down a little bit. We'd get a drawing, a thumbnail or a sketch from Madison, and then go to the department and say, is this what you meant? Is this? And they go, oh, actually, can you change this? Or maybe this arrow goes here or whatever. And then we would also give it back to Madison and give it back to the department and say, okay, we're going to go to print here. You have to make sure this is right. So it was very iterative that way. And then, going back to the zine piece, I feel like if it was a comic book and sequential art, it would seem like it would all be illustrations, but a zine maybe lends to having both illustrations or images as well as text. So maybe that's part of it as well. But there is quite a bit of text. There are also QR codes.
Yeah.
And just a pitch for that, the QR code in the back actually goes to a splash page we have. It's in English, Russian, Spanish, and Vietnamese, and we have print copies of those as well. But then below that, it has a list of every single one of the bureaus and departments and things in that zine, because oftentimes I even have a problem finding where does this information live on our website. So it would just make it like a one-stop shop for people to go there and figure out if they wanted to know more information. That's where it all was.
And so how familiar were you with city bureaucracy and the protocols and processes involved in planning, and even, the existence of neighborhood councils and things like that? How familiar were you with that before you started this?
Oh, I had zero familiarity.
But that's a good starting point if you're trying to convey that.
So this is why I was like, getting into this, like their art direction was fantastic, because you guys were so good at just giving me kind of like a concise list of prompts for the infographics. They actually kind of made a few just, I don't know what you guys used to like little, like kind of clip art, sort of just like, this is kind of loosely what we're thinking. You can reimagine this however you, but just to help me understand like the base of each thing. That was really great. And you guys made it really digestible for me, because I was totally like, this is so new for me, but I feel like I was able to, I didn't really have to do a ton of legwork to actually get to the illustration. It seemed like with the prompts, I was able to kind of crank out thumbnails pretty quickly. And it seemed like you guys there wasn't a ton of major changes with everything, so it just flowed. Yeah, I think that just the back and forth of the information was very clear for me.
Yeah, and I'll just give a shout out to Amber Groh.
Yes.
She is a mastermind. She's really good with some of these digital platforms, and so I just wanted to give her a huge shout out. She was definitely a partner, 50-50 with at getting this together with Madison and everything. So.
And so, there's a lot of information, both in image and word, in this zine. I am guessing that there are going to be others that maybe sort of break things out a little bit by topic. I see you nodding hesitantly.
I'm really hoping so. I think, we started the zine, the idea of it was April of 2024. And so that was, of course, before a lot of changes and dollars associated with that. We went out for a Vista and got that $10,000 for them, which we were so thankful for. But we're in the place now where we have not very many print copies left, because they've been so popular. And schools have asked for them, like unions, youth organizations, so we've handed a lot of them out, that was the idea about it. That's great. But now that we're going back and looking for funding, it's harder to find that funding. And I think the beautiful thing is that it was a sponsorship. So, sometimes you're going to get the naysayers, and not that we should always listen to them, but we did get a lot of comments about how much is the city paying for a comic book. And it's like, well, no city money went for this at all, actually. So, but, not all hope is lost. I feel like, I think even the mayor is getting good comments. I've been told a few times she's been out in the community and someone's actually approached her just about the zine. So I think that the city sees a value in it. And I think the city departments see the value in telling their stories differently. So I hold out hope for other kind of being a serial, like you mentioned. I would love for that to happen. And even like statewide entities, the mayor gets all across the state, she's got a big Rolodex. And so I think even we've been tapped by other statewide entities as saying, hey, this is a really great way for our municipality, our department to talk about what we do. So I feel like there's opportunities there. We're still searching for some of the funding, though.
Okay. So there is a will there.
It's just okay. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there a way? We'll figure it out.
and was this done to coincide with the 25th anniversary of the establishment of the neighborhood council system? Is that kind of what this commemorates to some extent?
Absolutely. Yes, Amber started that conversation about a year and a half ago, and the mayor proclaimed this the year of the neighborhoods. So in addition to the zine, we're working with Colin Quinhurst at the city and the planning department to potentially do a bike ride in the fall time, like a historic bike ride around the neighborhoods. as well as there's packages of different legislation coming through. One of them is like the placemaking block party legislation that just happened. So now it's way easier for communities, neighborhoods to have block parties. We waive the fees for that. They're working on trying to get some barricades. So there's pieces that we're trying to, especially after COVID, I think everyone kind of hobbled away, totally understandably. But I think now it's like, how do we re-engage the community? I mean, have more block parties, have just like know your neighbors. And that's a cool thing to do. It's also about resiliency. How are we helping our elderly neighbors? How are we getting together if there's, God forbid, an emergency or something? So it's not just like a cool thing, it's also a really smart thing to be doing. So we're trying to figure out how that might play out. And I think the mayor has some really good ideas about that as well.
And so this does seem like one piece of a larger strategy, because in contemplating this, as someone who is involved with the neighborhood council system and has been for a while, as much as I advocate for art, I was also thinking of where the efficacy of art stops. Because art can be, we tend to think of art as all powerful, and art can raise awareness. Art can inspire, it can catalyze, but translating that inspiration into action is sometimes another matter altogether. And so you can put out a zine that raises awareness about the city bureaucracy and the various city departments and the various processes that are involved in that, as well as the neighborhood council system. And then I think, certainly something that the perennial question at neighborhood councils is, how do we get bums on seats? How do we bring people into the room and get them excited about, what is really a powerful grassroots mechanism for change? In fact, I would even argue that it is as powerful as art, because it helps bring some really cool stuff to various neighborhoods. Yeah, in making it easier, for example, to do block parties, you're almost lowering this barrier so that it's easier to translate that inspiration into action.
Absolutely right. And like I said, I think that people that know about the neighborhood councils are all in. They totally get it.
Mm-hmm.
And then other folks don't even know they exist.
Yeah.
Or they're like, well, I'm in the Garland neighborhood. You are, but you're also in North Hill.
You're in the Garland district.
Yeah,
exactly.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So I think some people still are kind of like wavering that. I think that, we have a really good group of folks at the Office of Neighborhood Services right now. We just got a new director, Heather Hamlin, and then Gabby Ryan rounds out our team. And I feel like we are doing things like the SNLA Spokane Neighborhood Leadership Academy, which I know you've been involved with, trying to kind of skill build for folks that are interested in these things and how do we step into roles of officers and make change. And then the summit, little plug for that, October 25th, which is a one-day conference at the Gonzaga Hemington Center. And that's, again, for people that are maybe just figuring out if they're interested or not. So we're trying to level up and meet people exactly where they're at.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. And I think you're absolutely right, is I don't think people understand I don't like the word there was power, but the influence and the ability to talk to your change makers, your policy makers, the mayor, the council, through the neighborhood councils. I think that's such a powerful tool. You do it all the time. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think I use it interchangeably with efficacy, because that's so important, because especially I think in the modern age, and maybe it was ever thus, but I think of some of the social trends, and I think of a book like Bowling Alone, for example, which chronicles the America's transition from a nation of joiners who just intuitively understood the value of civic engagement to, folks who, and, Netflix and chill.
Yeah.
And so then we retreat into our bubbles, which social media then reinforces to some extent.
Yes. Can we take Facebook away?
Yeah, I'm totally here. I have mixed feelings even about being on Instagram, as Instagram is part of the whole
Instagram is
Facebook.
so much more wholesome compared to Facebook. Oh my gosh! After this project,
I bet.
Unreal. People are unhinged on Facebook.
Yeah.
Although I did feel like it proved the point of, I was reading some of the comments on every time the city would post about the zine on Facebook, and I was just like, you people, this is why we need this.
Yeah.
You need to read this. You don't even know what you're angry about.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, just stop. Put your phone down.
Right.
Yeah, because as an awareness raising tool, I mean, so often, and I don't think it's just neighborhood councils that struggle with this. I think a lot of civic groups, whether they're churches or smaller churches or nonprofits, they're asking, how do we get folks into the room? And Pollyanne, you had talked about this almost multi-pronged approach to meet people where they're at. And you would think another tool in the toolbox for reaching a potentially new audience and getting them to recognize the value of whatever you're going on about would be, you would think that value would be recognized by the people who care about it most. Yeah.
Well, and let's be real. I'm on Facebook far too much, guys. I'm going to admit it. But when you look at those comments, friend, it's like the 5 same people. And I just want to say, would you please go to therapy? Would you please go for a walk or hug your loved one? Because something's going on there that's really not about the city.
Or let your loved one hug you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, it's like the 5 same people, really. It's like, oh, geez.
Because some of the comments just don't even make sense.
Yeah.
You're just like, you seem so angry.
Yeah, I know. And not angry about the right stuff, I think.
No,
anyways, but yeah.
And so you say, aside from these 5 people on Facebook, you've gotten a positive feedback. I am curious, has it inspired, or do you have any anecdotal evidence of someone saying, you know what, I read this zine, had no idea the neighborhood councils existed, and I think I'm going to go check out my next neighborhood council meeting, or I'm going to go and sit in on a city council meeting?
Well, I have one example, which is a person up at the North Indian Trail. I handed him a zine. It was the first time he'd ever gone to a neighborhood council meeting. And just last night, I saw him at the community assembly meeting, which is the...
so he made the jump from the neighborhood council to the CA. Okay.
And so neighborhood council, of course, there's 29 of them. And then they have almost a congressional body that they all meet one representative.
I call it a powwow.
A powwow, okay. And he came there, and I think he was really interested because he had figured out that graphic that shows you can go to your subcommittee, you can go to CA, you can go here, there. And I think he just wanted to learn more about, how does the system work? Where do I plug in? And CA, I think, has a different relationship with city council. We have the city council president come every month, and they're actually crafting, it's kind of coming from the neighbor councils, they're crafting potential resolutions for city council to then look and review and kind of give comment on and things like that. So they're getting to that level of really trying to make policy changes.
Yeah.
So that's, again, power of the people.
And that serves as the basis for larger change. When you codify that in a planning document, I think of the comprehensive plan, which is known as the comp plan. And man, that could use a zine unto itself, because that ends up documenting all the stuff that people want to see. And then the city and parks and all sorts of different departments end up using that as the basis for a lot of their projects. So to my point about a lot of people feeling disenfranchised and saying, I can't make any change. And this is maybe why they're so angry on Facebook, is because they say, I want to see change that isn't happening. And they end up, old man shakes his fist at a cloud. Instead of that, I maybe don't take the anger directly to city council or your neighborhood council, but, approach them with positive intent. And then, make the change there.
Yeah, and Kevin Freibot, he actually just presented last night at the CA, and he mentioned, I haven't seen the draft yet, but he mentions in the new comp plan that they've put in different pictures and things like little, I don't know how graphic they are, they might be more clip art, but they're trying to use more visuals instead of just being all text, because some of those are just all text, and some of the language is from the late 90s, so Chimney Christmas. But Kevin was our point person for the illustration about the public works, where it was the layering of the sewer and the water that you did, which is such an amazing
That was my favorite.
Oh gosh,
infographic. It was
so lovely,
so detailed.
Yes.
I love the fact that you say the illustration about sewer and water was one of your favorites. To me that just speaks city process nerd, which is great. I mean, isn't that the intent?
There's a lot more going on in that.
And it features the mural down here on the barber shop in North Monroe.
Yeah.
So big connection. So yeah.
And so, Madison, I'm curious as to what you took from this beyond an artistic opportunity. Did it, in doing some of that research and getting some of those prompts for the graphics, did it kind of pique your interest in, this whole sphere of civic engagement that exists?
Yeah, absolutely. I think before this project, I was loosely I would love to get more involved with the community because I've really fallen in love with Spokane since I've lived here. And I've been passionate about a lot of the like historic, like the architecture and like, you know, just different things like that. But having gone through like the visual aspect, now I'm kind of like, how can I like be more involved in the community, and what are different ways that like, you know, I can do things. And this was a perfect like informational thing. Like I feel like I learned a lot doing this project. So yeah, it's definitely piqued my interest in like, I'm curious about the neighborhood councils and just I don't know, like who's running the city too, because I was like, well, I don't know. You know, maybe I'll pay a little closer attention to voting next time. Like it's piqued my interest because I'm traditionally like, I live in my own little bubble with my dog and my garden and, you know, my happy little life that like, and I just sort of ignore everything outside. And I think a lot of people probably do that too. But yeah, this is definitely like, I've had an interest in getting more involved, and that's not really going away. So yeah.
And just career-wise, what projects do you have in the pipeline? Because I'm curious, now that we've seen the Inlander Best Of cover, we've seen This Is Spokane, the zine, what's in the pipeline for you?
So I've been putting a lot of my time into like wholesaling, like my work that I currently have. So getting that into various stores around town, and just sort of setting that up, mainly because like I am having a kid this fall, so I'm sort of setting up some passive income things.
That's
to
smart.
Like
Yeah.
get that up and rolling. As far as like bigger projects, I've been approached by a few different people with ideas, but nothing is like written in stone yet.
Yeah, welcome to freelancing.
Yeah. Which is, you know, it's very like up in the air, but I always try to like, you know, layer my income.
Yeah.
So having a bunch of different irons in the fire, I've got a lot of personal projects that I'm really excited about, that I'm working on, based on, I know so the cover of the Inlander featured a lot of marmots, and that's kind of like been my thing.
Yeah.
I had someone come up to one of the markets, and she's like, "Are you the marmot girl?" I was like, "Why?"
There are worse nicknames.
Why? Yes,
yeah.
I am actually. So I have like a little. It started off as just like a fun mini brand, kind of. That's the Spokane Marmot Society.
Oh, okay.
And
okay.
it's like a sweatshirt and stickers and stuff right now. But I'm like, I want to make this a legit thing, and I would love to figure out how to incorporate it into like somehow working with like getting people to go and visit like the small businesses around town, like locally owned businesses. So that's been a passion project for me. I have a lot of ideas on how to like bring that all together, but that's like high level. One of the things that I'm working on that I'm excited about.
Well, merch is a good way to establish that that fairly steady revenue stream by having that. And Pollyanne, now that the city kind of has this down, and again, I'm assuming that there's been a pretty positive reception within the city to this. Are there any other ways that you're going to tie in art to awareness raising or encouraging civic engagement?
I really hope so. I really look forward to that. I think one way, and not to skirt your question there, is one way we are already is through the asphalt art projects. And so it's a partnership with Spokane Art. Shelby Allison, shout out to her. She is amazing. And those, if folks aren't familiar, they're a traffic calming measure where we actually, there's each of the neighborhoods get a project, and then there's 2 crosswalks in each district. So you've probably seen one in your neighborhood. There's one just painted last weekend right in here in Emerson, Garfield, right by the park where the farmers market is. And it's Mallory Batista who did the design. And it is a garden theme, so it's a kind of produce theme and whatnot. And so it's very, I think they probably picked that because they knew the market was going to go there. So I think that's one way we're using art in our office to make a real impact. It's definitely, there's science behind it. There's a Bloomberg report that says if you put art on the street, it's it helps slow down traffic and whatnot. So that's one way we're doing it as well. One of the things I mentioned was the asphalt art, sometimes they rub off within a year or two. And so one thing I was hoping to see if there's a way to do is, it's kind of like paint by numbers. For every year for the neighborhood who wants to keep it up, to have that be like their potluck and their way to get back on the street and kind of touch up things and meet one another and invite people and have food and have merriment and fellowship. So that's another way that I think we could kind of bring people together.
Yeah, and Mallory was in here recently, and we ended up talking about, here we've been talking about the awareness raising aspect of art, and we were talking about, because she does so much public art, the placemaking power of art. And so it's nice to see all these different facets and what they mean to folks who even might not fancy themselves art aficionados. It's like, but it's you can see the value when it's there. And
maybe I'll mention one more thing too is I'm the liaison with Washington Trust for Historical Preservation, and they have about $2 million. There's 4 different districts: South Perry, Hilliard, Garland, and North Monroe, and each get about $460. And many of those business districts are getting murals. So there's going to be a beautiful mural on the side of the Kehoe building, which is owned by Bobby Whitaker on Hilliard, and it's Emma Noyes who's doing the design for it.
Didn't that just go in, or was that just announced?
I think it was just announced. I don't think it's gone in yet. But so again, we're trying to figure out how are these dollars, like you said, they're going to be for placemaking, and they're going to not only bring families in, but it's also commerce for the local small businesses and things like that. So I think that's another way our office is trying to use art or use that kind of placemaking concept to bring people in and get them involved. So now we just have to have zines at every of those small businesses, right, guys?
Yeah. And, on that subject, Daria Pilgrim, who is heavily involved in both Garland and especially Hilliard's efforts to establish creative districts, was a guest here, and we talked about all of that power, the economic power of art. So here we are, just, showcasing all its many aspects.
She's great. She's so smart.
Yeah. But I want to thank you both for coming in. Before you dash out of here, I don't know if you're aware that we have a lightning round.
Okay.
And so these are questions that may or may not be related to the conversation, but they kind of allow us to explore different territory.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So each of these questions is going to apply to you. So I'll alternate so that, Pollyanne, you have time, for example, to think of an answer, while Madison, you're on the spot. So, so the first one is a really simple either or. Board games or video games?
Oh, that's unfair. I love both so much. I think board games.
You'd go with board games. The tactile,
The tactile, and then I think maybe the social aspect of a board game.
Okay.
If I play a video game, that's very much a solo or with my husband. So.
and I would just say that's coming from the self-professed introvert who enjoys the small company.
No. So I like to have a game night where we invite friends over, and then I like to recover for weeks without speaking to anybody.
And Pollyanne, what about you?
I'm definitely board games. I'm 52, so my foray into video games was like Dig Dug and Joust and the original Pac-Man.
Those still have their merit.
Do they?
I remember playing Cabbage Patch Kids on the ColecoVision and thinking that it was the height of the video game experience at the time. So, yeah. Okay, cool. And Pollyanne, now you field this one. An experience in your life that was grueling at the time, but you came out better for it.
I had the breast cancer. And I got a mastectomy on the right side. And I was really lucky because I had a hippy-dippy lady friend who would be like, I have a feeling, will you go get checked out? I was only 42. And so I did, and they found something. It was in C2, and then when they took it out, they figured out it was stage 1. So I was very lucky. Get checked early, ladies. Really get checked. People, please get checked early. But it was one of the best things that's ever happened to me. I think it helped me reevaluate. I was in a pretty stressful job. Like, what the heck? What am I doing? What am I living here for? And also, a lot of people came out of the woodwork to tell me that they loved me. Like, even crusty old punk rockers that were like, I haven't seen you in 20 years, but I love you, man. Blah, blah. So I just think I came out of it as a better person for it. So, and I get checked all the time, and I'm doing super good now. So yeah.
So did that prompt a career change? Did you change direction there because of it, and you just kind of did that sort of soul searching moment?
I did. I went from working from Sam Adams, who was the mayor, to being the executive director of a place called the Independent Publishing Resource Center. And anyone that's an executive director of a small arts nonprofit knows it takes a lot out of you.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think for me, I was like, I love this work, but I have to do something else. So then I went back to the city and worked for a Chloe Daly at the city of Portland.
Cool. Madison?
I wish I had an interesting answer. When I'd say college was grueling for me.
College was grueling. Any
Yeah.
particular aspect of college?
I don't know, just doing things that classes that I didn't want to do but was required to, because that's how you get your piece of paper that says you did a thing.
Well, follow on. What was your least favorite class?
I think just those core classes, like the math and writing, not because they were challenging, but because I actually was really lucky to come from a really good school system that was excellent in math, science, and writing. And so I was taking these classes and I was like, this is stuff I learned in 7th grade. Are you serious?
That made it easier,
and
yeah.
just beating my head against the table and being like, I just want to do art. I want to make arts and crafts. I want to go to my sculpture class. I want to go make ceramics, because I went to school for art. So, yeah, those core classes, I was like, I don't need these.
So this is a little more open-ended, and I can give you some guidance on how you might interpret this, but I'll kind of leave it open to you. So finish this sentence. Whatever happened to... and that could be something nostalgic that you absolutely loved in the past that isn't around anymore, those Keebler Pizzeria's snacks that were
Kudos bars.
Kudos bars, and they've just vanished. I'm not familiar with Kudos bars.
So Kudos bars have a special place in my heart because my mom is an outdoor enthusiast, and she was I grew up in Montana, and we were in the mountains all the time. And my mom was like, well, we're going hiking. And, 3-year-old me would be like, okay, well, I need encouragement. And she would get out a Kudos bar and she'd be like, at the next resting bench, you can have a Kudos bar. And so those are a special, the highest of special rewards for doing a thing. The Kudos bar.
So the Kudos was your reward.
Yeah, the Kudos. Yeah.
Very cool. Pollyanne?
I think it's cursive writing. I'm realizing now
Yeah.
that young people do not do that. I mean, our Constitution is in cursive, so that could be a problem, but I love cursive writing. I love printmaking, like you mentioned, and illustration and that kind of, have tons of fountain pens and whatnot, so cursive writing.
Cursive writing. Yeah. It has been on the wane. I haven't, I didn't twig until now, so I'm glad you brought it
out
up.
of school systems, not
I know.
that much longer.
I know.
After I think it was, I don't know that my younger sister learned it.
Yeah.
Which is
nuts.
Wild.
Yeah. I remember struggling with it. And so, yeah. My writing in any form is atrocious. So, Pollyanne, a pivotal piece of artwork in your life, was there something that you saw that was transformative? And when Merritt Fisher and Rob Worstel of the MAC were in here, we ended up on kind of an interesting subject where they said, art, you don't have to be enamored of art. You can also be repulsed by it in some cases. So I don't know if there was a pivotal piece of artwork that maybe inspired you, or maybe that you found solace in, or that you thought, I loathe this so much and never want to see anything like it again.
I'm a huge Cindy Sherman fan.
Okay.
Although she's a photographer. I discovered her a little bit later in life. I think for me, I'm going to go back to my roots, which is punk music. I think that probably, whether I grew up kind of with the East Bay stuff, like Green Day before they became really commercial, or the Descendants, or even the old school stuff like Iggy and the Stooges. And I think my genre is more now more garage music, like Billy Childish and the Radiant Sound and things like that. I'm just naming off bands that I like, guys, but I think it's probably punk rock music. I grew up a poor kid, and so I used to wear thrift store clothes out of necessity, and then I realized, oh shoot, I can actually have agency over this, and I'm gonna dazzle my hair. And the picture between 7th grade and 8th grade, 7th grade I'm all preppy looking, and 8th grade I've got the Robert Smith haircut with a tail. So something happened in that year, that summer, and that's when I discovered punk rock. So I think it's punk music.
Yeah, there was a point when Robert Smith discovered the Robert Smith haircut too. There was a pre spiky haired cure, which is kind of interesting.
Absolutely.
And I'm really pleased that you went, when I said art, you included music in that, because I just had the conception of visual art, since that's kind of what we're discussing today, but I'm glad you went towards punk. And speaking of zines, the whole punk scene
Absolutely.
and the zine scene kind of went hand in hand.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that makes perfect sense why you're here now. Madison?
Oh, that's a tough question. I'd say like I, over the years, have stumbled on like an artist that I've been like, wow, I love all of their stuff. I want to figure out how do they do that. And it's like changes every few years, So like I think when I was like a little kid, I'm terrible at names, so I don't know the names of any of these people. But there was like someone gave me a book that was this really talented illustrator who just did animals in like great detail, and I think she did them in like colored pencil and like some mixed media sort of things. But the way that she did the hair on the animal, like I would pore over this book, like, and then try to like copy, like how did she get the little, like, and it just fixating on things like that. And then a little bit older, there's an artist that draws monsters on sticky notes, like. He's a British artist, and someone showed me his work, and I was like, it's so simple, but I love the way that and I was obsessed with drawing like creatures and characters for like 4 years after seeing that. And then like now I've got these like graphic novelists kind of, but they had other career backgrounds. Like one was like a landscape architect who like now does kind of comic stuff. And some of his books, like I've got all of his books and love the way that he draws and uses color. And so I'd say like it's not been like a piece of art, it's been like an artist and their work and the way that they do things, and then just trying to figure out like how they do it and how I can apply like that skill set to my own skill set and make it my own kind of,
Yeah. And that's the surest way, I think, to become an art appreciator, is to see something that you value, or something that you're intrigued by in a work of art, and then try to replicate that yourself. And when you realize just how devilish it is, it makes you appreciate that all the more.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I want to thank both of you so much for coming in today and talking about, This Is Spokane, and so much more. So appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.